Hello and welcome to one and all. In this class, we will check out the next very important board exam question, sources of public revenue. Okay, this is also from the Unit 8 macroeconomic analysis. Okay, so SAQ 29, what are the sources of public revenue? The public revenue is also a part of public finance. Public finance in the sense that this is not the finance of the public, it is not the general public, we are talking about the government's finance. Okay, so in the same way, public revenue refers to the revenue received by the government. Okay, please understand, please remember, public revenue, public debt, or public expenditure, all these are parts of the public finance. So this, whenever we talk about the public finance or the public revenue, public expenditure, public debt, so all these are the revenue, debt or expenditure of the government, not the general public. Okay, and public revenue can be classified into two kinds. There are two sources of revenue for the government. The first and foremost is the tax revenue, and the second one is the non-tax revenue. So let us check out what are all the tax revenue. So the first one, tax revenue. So the major source of revenue for the government is tax revenue. So what is the tax revenue? The government imposes taxes on people, isn't it? The government imposes taxes on individuals as well as for the companies. The government imposes taxes on property. The government imposes taxes on goods and services, isn't it? That is one of the major source of revenues for the government. Okay, so the first is the tax revenue. Revenue received by the government through collection of taxes from the public is known as tax revenue. Tax revenue is the major source of revenue for the government. Taxes can be classified into two types. The first one, direct tax, like income tax, property tax, corporate tax, etc., which are levied on individuals or companies. Now you have to understand direct tax and indirect tax. See, direct tax means, see for example, you take the income tax. Okay, so income tax, on whom the government is imposing the income tax, whoever the individual, let us say the government is imposing the tax on one particular individual whose income is above a certain limit, isn't it? So that person directly pays the tax to the government. So the government is imposing the tax on person A who is receiving income beyond a certain limit, and this person A is responsible to pay the tax to the government, or the government is imposing tax on a particular company, that is called as the corporation tax. Okay, so this particular company B is responsible to pay the tax to the government. So the government is imposing the tax on person A, and that person is responsible to pay the tax to the government. The government is imposing the corporation tax on company B, and that company is responsible to pay the tax to the government. So that means whoever is on whom the government is imposing the tax, that is the import of tax, on whom the who is actually finally paying the tax, that is called as the incidence of tax. Okay, so the direct tax is something, the person on whom the tax is imposed, the same person is paying the tax to the government. Let us take the indirect tax. So indirect tax, for example, you take the GST or the sales, earlier it was called as the sales tax. So the indirect tax, mostly it is levied on the goods and services. So the government is levying the tax on the goods and services. Who is producing the goods and services? The producers are producing the goods and services, isn't it? So the producers, the government is levying the tax on the producer, that is excise duty. And what the producers are doing, the producers are passing it on to the wholesalers. The wholesalers are passing it on to the retailers. The retailers are passing it on to the consumers. So the government is levying the tax on one person, but actually finally the tax is paid by another person. The imposition of tax is on one person, the incidence of tax is on the other person, that is an indirect tax. When the person who is on whom the tax is imposed, if the same person is paying the tax, that is the direct tax. the person on whom the tax is imposed, but another person is paying the tax, that is called as the indirect tax. Okay, so if the tax is levied on income, if the tax is levied on property, if the tax is levied on wealth, if the tax is levied on assets, if the tax is levied on company, then all these, they all come under the direct tax, because the same person, the same company has to pay the tax to the government. And like for indirect taxes, like excise duty, it is the on the volume of output produced on a company. And for example, another one, customs duty, that is on the imports and exports, or those goods. Export duty and import duty, that is the customs duty. And we have various service tax. So all these, they all come under the category of indirect tax, which are levied on goods and services. Okay, now recently, you all must be aware, the government has introduced the GST, that is the goods and service tax. So GST is an indirect tax which has replaced many indirect taxes since March 2017. So earlier, there were so many indirect taxes in the country: mod VAT, sen VAT, value added tax. So many different kinds of indirect taxes were prevailing in the country, and the government replaced all those indirect taxes with one single tax, that is called as the GST. So GST is a comprehensive multi-stage destination based tax that is levied on every value addition. So every value addition, see, from the raw material to intermediary stage, some values added, so the tax is paid up to the only the intermediary level, and then from the intermediary level to the final goods, again some more values added, so only that difference is paid in the GST. Okay, so every value added, the tax is being paid. Okay, so all the earlier there were so many taxes were existing in our country, so all those taxes were replaced by one single tax, that is the goods and service tax, which is introduced in our country in March 2017. Okay, now this is one of the main source of revenue for the government. Now, apart from the tax revenue, the government also receives revenue from other sources, that is called as the non-tax revenue. Revenue received by the government from other sources apart from taxes or the non-tax revenue. So this includes first administrative revenue, like tuition fee, license fee, etc. So tuition fee, the government is having so many government colleges are there, government schools are there, isn't it? So all those fees, that is the tuition fee. License fee, the government is giving the license to establish a business, the government is providing the license for to have, own a vehicle, isn't it? Driving license. So all those, so whatever the fees received through that is the license fee. So why it is called an administrative revenue? Because so these fees are realized by the government because of the efforts of the administrative department of the government. Okay, so because of the administrative efforts of the administrative staff members of the government is realizing all these kind of fees. So that's why it is called as the administrative revenue. Okay, then the second one is the commercial revenue, that is revenue received from public sector units like Indian Railways, Indian Oil Corporation, State Road Transport Corporations, etc. Isn't it? There are so many public sector enterprises are there. So whatever the profit, if they are making profit, so if whatever the profit earned by those public sector departmental undertakings or the public sector and enterprises, all those revenue happens to be the commercial revenue, like all these Indian Railways, Indian Oil Corporations, ONGC, State Road Transport Corporation, State Electricity Boards, isn't it? So there's so many public sector units are there, so many departmental undertakings are there, the post and telegraph, so many things are there. So whatever the revenue received by all those public sector undertakings is the revenue to the government. So that is the commercial revenue. Okay, then apart from that, what the government can do, the government can borrow loans and advances. From whom they can borrow? The government can borrow either from the internal sources or from the external sources. So the third one, loans and advances received either through internal sources. Internal sources means what? Within the boundaries of the country. That is within the country, like from the government, from RBI. In our country is RBI, but generally any government can borrow from the central bank. In our country, RBI is the central bank. From RBI and other financial institutions within the country, and also from the private individuals, etc., or from external sources like from World Bank, IMF, that is International Monetary Fund. The government can borrow from the foreign governments, foreign private individuals, isn't it? So foreign companies. So they all come under the category of external sources of loans and advances. Okay, then apart from loans and advances, there is something called as the grants in aid. That is the fourth one. Grants in aid can be given by the central government to the state governments or from state government to the village panchayats. Okay, so the grants in aid is something, the difference between loans and advances and grants in aid is loans and advances have to be repaid along with the interest. The principal amount along with the interest has to be repaid by the government. But grants is something, it is need not have to be repaid. Okay, this is a kind of special situation the grants are provided. Okay, so the grants, either the central government can receive grants if any dire situations are there. If a country is a backward country, if a particular region is backward, if a particular country is a backward country, then all the developed countries might give grants. If a particular region is backward within the country, then the central government can give a grants to that particular state government in which that region falls. Okay, so any like that kind of special situation, the grants are provided. So that's why grants need not have to be repaid. And grants can be either a general grant in the sense whatever the funds received out through general grant, that fund can be used for any purpose, or it can be specific grant may be only for the grant is provided only for that special purpose. For example, to provide improve the healthcare facilities in that particular region, to improve the educational facilities in this particular region. See, for example, recently we all had the problem of COVID. Okay, so if any backward country, they did not have funds to meet that COVID vaccinations or whatever the treatment and all. So if the developed countries providing that COVID grant, like for example COVID fund, so that has to be utilized only for that COVID treatment. So that is kind of specific grant. Okay, so these are all the various sources of public revenue. Okay, I repeat again, this is one of the very important questions asked in the board exam. Very rarely you might get this even for 10 marks. Okay, but most of the time it is asked under 5 marks. Okay, so if you find this video useful, please like, share and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you have any doubts, please mention them in the comment box. Okay, until my next class, take care. Bye bye.